Hello, welcome. My name is Prince Seki, a student of Ghana Communication Technology University. In this tutorial, we will dive into a VB concept called Crud operations, and which is create, read, update, and delete from a data source. But since this is a VB environment, what I'll be doing is that I will be sourcing our data from a table which is called in VB Datagridview. So whilst there are numerous ways of connecting your database to your VB, we will be using the grid view, which will source the data from the data table. All right. So also at the end of this video, we'll also be adding a picture format, like picking a picture from your PC into the database so that you can fix that one also into the database. So with that said, let's jump right in. Okay, so as I said earlier, let me show you the form. So basically, this is the form. Here we have an ID. This ID has a label. This ID is a label and it has an input field. The first name also has an input field. The same with the last name, likewise the age. So over here we also have the add button. This add button is basically going to help us to add into the data grid view, which is the form or the table that will appear here. And this is the delete button, will help us delete, update, and browse will also help us to select picture and then add it to the data grid view. So basically, this is the data grid view here. This is where the form or the table will be loaded into. So basically, that's what is happening here. So with that said, let's jump into the code and see what we are doing here. Alright, so not to waste your time, this is the code and this is a dummy data. So basically, as you can see, I've initialized or established a table here. So this is a public class. Basically, what it means is that this class, anything that we declare here, can be accessed by any other class beneath it. That's the private classes and all that. So this is a table that I've initialized. This is the table as a new data table. Now I established this as a new data table because for every instance that this app should get exposed to, it to create my table. All right, and then this is the variable I've established here as an integer, which is index. This index is basically going to show us the number of records or the number of rows we have in the table. So let me show you where I connected the table to the data grid view, because as you can see in this data grid view, this is where it will be displayed, but then in the code we said it is a data table, it's not data grid view. So since we have established that it's a data table, we have to also connect it to the data grid view. So as you can see from here, we have data grid view 1 dot data source is connected to the table. So as you can see, we have connected this table here, which we've declared at the top. We have connected it to the data grid view. All right, so that's basically it. So as you can see from here, this is a dummy data, but before we can insert a data or a row into our table, we need to establish columns. So this column is basically a holding place for data, like the ID, the first name, the last name, and then the age. So as you can see, the table, since we are connecting our database to the table, we are saying that table.columns.add. So we are adding to the column. All right, so the first is the ID, but then we have to specify the type of ID we are putting into the system. So we are specifying that it is a system.int.32. basically it's just saying that it is an integer of 32-bit type. That's basically what is happening here. And here also we have the columns.add, then the first name, the same thing applies here, but then this is a string because first name definitely is a string. And we also have here the last name, definitely a string, and age, but this age is also an integer, so we specify here as an integer. So moving on, after adding this, basically as you can see from this table or from this code, this is a form. So this happens when the form loads. So after establishing our columns, we are now going to insert data into this column. So we have table.rows.add. So we initialize our table and we establish that we are adding to the rows. Then we add the first ID, which is 1, the second and the its data, that's Seki Prince. Basically it's just saying that we have our first name, our ID, first name, last name, and then the age. So likewise we did this for the different dummy data we have here, and then we connected the table to the data source. Now one thing you must note is that since we are connecting the table to the Datagridview 1 as its data source, it means we have to establish all these first before we connect it, otherwise it wouldn't update. All right, so this is where state management comes in. So basically you have to declare everything here before we assign the table to the data source. All right, so let's jump into the next phase of the okay. So moving on from there, as I said, we'll be looking at how we insert the data. So before we do that, let's go to our design. So this is our design, and this is an add button. So we go into this add button, and then we see what's happening here. So now, as I said earlier, I've declared the input field. Now every input field has a controller, which is called a text box and its name. So I've specified my controller's name as the ID controller as text box ID, and first name is text box FN, last name is text box LN, and then the age is text box age. So before you can access its values, you have to specify a method called the text. That's to access the value of that controller. So as you can see here, anytime I click on the add button, what happens here is that it takes table.rows.add. So basically we are adding to the table. So as you can see, I have done this in the dummy table here, the same thing that's being done here. That's what I'm doing here, but this time around I'm taking the data from a live location, which is the all right. So where is the add button? Okay, this is it. So as you can see, the add button is just taking the text box ID dot the text and takes the full name, the first name, takes the last name, and then the age. And what it does is that it will input that data into the table. Now after doing that, I told you earlier that it is called state management. After that is being done, the table would not automatically update. You have to specify that the Datagridview, which is here, should source the data from table again. You have to do this once more time because the data is being updated. So if you don't do this, you see that you add the data, but it will not show to the user. But although it can be displayed in the terminal, but then it will not show to the front end. That's the user side. All right, so this is basically the add button and what it does. So yeah, so let's do that. Let's try that here. So let's see. Let me run the code and then we see what's happening here. So it's loading now. It has come. So let's type in the data. Let's specify. So as you can see, this is the dummy data, the initial dummy data that I've inserted into the system. This is just for you to see that it works. That's when the form loads, the first data will appear. So let's put in. So anytime let's input something here. Let's say 7, our ID of 7. Let's change the name to Elliot. Let's maintain all this and let's change the date to 28. And if we click on the add button, you see that it is being updated. This is it here, Elliot Adela 28, as you can see from here. All right, so that's basically what is happening here. So let's jump right into the delete button. So all right, so let me just minimize this and then come into the delete button. So as you can see from the delete button, what happens here is that you take the current Datagridview cell, that's the row, and then you take the Datagridview, that row specified here, that's the index, then we'll remove it at that index. So it means that what's going to happen is that, let me show you from my form. Let's open here. So basically what's going to happen for the delete is that for me to update something from here, for me to delete from here, I would have to type on a specific thing that I want to delete, and I've specified in the video that this is in the tutorial that this is the index. So if I tap on this index, automatically you see that it appears back into my input field. So basically, if I want to delete, I'll just tap on the delete button, and I told you earlier that the delete button deletes based on the specific index. So since we have specified the index to be 2, we'll just tap on delete, and then you see that the system is being updated, and then 2 is no longer in the system. The same thing happens when I tap on 1 and click on delete. All right, so let's move to the next phase of the deal.